good.
Nice.
Kaelyn, what you have for us then?
All right. Well, for this session, I'm going to talk about a couple of very closely related films. So both of these are in the Candyman franchise. So I'm going to talk first about the 1992 Candyman, which is a very good, excellent cult classic film. This one, so the whole lore around Candyman as a character is he's this serial killer type of figure. They're horror films, and as you find out during the course of the first film, Candyman is a Black man who lived in the late 19th century. He was an artist. He fell in love with a white man's daughter, and that white man was kind of like helping and mentoring him. But because they fell in love, that's not okay, because during this period, people were very freaked out about the idea of interracial relationships and biracial children. So the guy had this man killed very, very, very brutally. He was essentially lynched. He was stung by a whole bunch of bees. He was set on fire. He had his arm cut off and replaced with a hook. And just is very, very disfigured from all of this, like just absolutely brutal murder of this man just for the crime of falling in love with somebody that he wasn't allowed to be with. And so there's this legend. It's the whole film kind of goes with the whole idea of urban legends and myths and the scary things that you do, these scary stories. And for Candyman, it's if you look in the mirror and say his name 5 times, he will appear behind you and he will kill you. Similar to Bloody Mary and other creepy story characters like that. We told stories like this when I was a kid. Very suitably, this film came out the year I was born, so very much grew up with this. It also might in fact be the reason that I was absolutely terrified of bees for the first 20 something years of my life. Bees are scary, all right? So that's how this goes on. So the first film follows these 2 graduate students at I think it was University of Illinois. This is set in Chicago. They're basically investigating murders that are associated with the Candyman legend. One of them is a white woman named Helen. The other one is a Black woman named oh god, her name just went out of my brain.
Bernadette.
Bernadette, thank you. I was just like, it starts with a B, it starts with a B, it starts with a B. What was it?
Played by the great director, Casey Lemons.
Yes, she's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful in this.
I almost called her Cordelia Mapp, which is her character from The Silence of the Lambs. I almost called her that.
Yeah.
I said, no, that's not her name. And I went, oh, okay. So.
Yeah. Which is funny because I was having trouble remembering the name Helen earlier. Now, of course, I've completely flip-flopped it.
I don't know how, because he says Helen's name like 18 million times in that movie.
Just one of those names that didn't stick out to me for whatever reason, all right? It's a very common name,
And the reason I started remembering it, other than him saying his line to her that's so famous, is that headline is actually the title of my favorite piece of music by Philip Glass on there.
Cool.
It was always you, Helen, is the piano. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about.
Gotcha. So anyway, these 2 are basically investigating these murders as a thesis that they're writing together. And throughout this entire thing, the thing that's really fun for me in this is Helen is kind of a bit of an idiot early in the film. She gets a little better, but she's doing like all of these dumb horror protagonist things, and Bernadette is just like, I really don't think we should do this. Right. And she's kind of the voice of reason. She's just like, why are you doing, like, why do you want to do this? Why do you want to say the guy's name? That's stupid. Why do you want to go poke around in this building in this very obviously low income Black neighborhood? They're gonna think we're cops. This is stupid.
It's Cabrini Green.
Yes, that's the name of the neighborhood.
Yeah,
So they're poking around. She's doing all this dumb stuff, crawling through holes on the wall. You know, she has this idea that, okay, so this like Candyman figure is actually just like a regular guy, right? And he comes through from behind the mirrors, because she realizes that the condo that she lived in is actually a super duper gentrified project house building. And it has the exact same layout as this building where one of these murders has taken place. So she figures out, okay, you know, if I like remove this bathroom mirror, it's actually connected to the next unit. We go through there. She goes through and starts taking pictures of everything. There's these like murals on the wall, graffiti on the wall and everything, and it depicts the Candyman figure. She finds some candy on the ground. It has razor blades in it. Of course, this is why all of our parents, for Tim and I's generation, were freaking the hell out about razor blades and candy.
No,
for
we heard it when I was a kid too.
But it
I
was
know,
like it was
it's
like
been a
an
thing
urban
forever,
legend, though.
but
Yeah, it's like I've never
I'm
found
sure-
razor blades in
Yeah,
candy.
I'm sure that movie did
Candyman-
not help in our case.
Yeah,
No,
Candyman kind
no.
of like homogenizes all of these different urban legends
Yeah.
into
Yeah.
one, you know, into one thing.
That was
But,
kind of what
yeah.
the story does. Have y'all
Yeah.
read the story, The Forbidden
Yes,
Clive
I-
Barker?
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I
Hmm.
actually got him to sign a
Oh,
hardcover that has that in
Wow.
it. It's really
It's
cool.
actually my
It's-
favorite story by him.
Looks cool.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
That's I'll actually when Kaelyn is done with her presentation.
But the movie
I'll
is
talk
so
a little bit about
different.
the
But
story. Yeah.
the
Mhm.
idea, though, yeah, the Candyman
Yeah.
character in the urban legends is really what you remember from the story at the moment.
Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
and like, and I want to go into that a little bit once
Okay,
you're
yeah,
done
sure.
with the
Yeah,
presentation. 'cause I
I'd be
think there's a
interested in
lot of
hearing
It's
things-
a
about it.
yeah, it's a lot of layers to.
If you haven't
Candyman
read it, it's
mythos.
really worth
Yeah.
the read. It is.
I
So
will
we'll
at some
talk
point,
about
because
that.
I'm done with my graduate program and I can read for fun again.
Oh, it's
Guys, I'm
Yay.
so
It's a
excited.
good thing.
It's like 6 pages long. There's not you can get in a
Yeah, it's
sitting.
No,
It's
you
pretty
don't
short,
understand.
yeah.
I got to a point where like all I could do was read
Lunchtime.
and reread the same like 20 books. It was bad. It was really bad. Anyway,
Yeah, The Forbidden is easy. It's not like the Damnation game or something by him. The Great and Secret
yeah.
Show, you know,
Oh yeah,
or just like very long.
oh gosh. All right. So they're poking around, they're trying to figure out what's going on with all of this. And then you know, this group of guys shows up and ends up assaulting Helen. One of them is like holding on to a hook. So it's like, oh, I get it now. That guy is Candyman. It's not real. It's an urban legend. It's actually just like this one asshole. And he beats the snot out of her. She gets like a black eye. She wakes up. She gets taken to the police department. This very kind black policeman interviews her, finds out what's going on. They figure out which guy did it. They arrest him. And now the killings are gonna stop, right? Wrong. No, the killings do not stop, because this urban legend is actually true, of course, because otherwise it wouldn't be a very good horror movie, right? You know, we'd all be bored. And there's actually like a lot of really good reasons for that, because the thing that I really love about this film is that it goes really into all of the political stuff around why urban legends exist, why they're a thing in the first place, why we have folklore as human beings. And like every culture, every society has folklore of some kind, and urban legends are a type of folklore that emerge like specifically in urban settings. So the killings continue. It's still a thing that's going on. Helen herself gets attacked because she and her partner decide to, be dumb and do the Candyman thing in the mirror, of course. And, she gets that fifth one out. So of course she's a target now. She doesn't get instantly killed, though. Of course, he has to mess with her first, like a lot. So a lot. She ends up in this situation where she has blackouts. She wakes up, doesn't know where she is, doesn't know what happened. She like has visions of Candyman like approaching her and talking to her and saying all of this stuff like, be my victim or whatever. I have to spill innocent blood now because
that
fucked up.
spiel he gives her in that
It's so good. Like
that
I'm
is
not
word
even
for
gonna
word from
try
the story.
quote
That's
it verbatim, but it is excellent. Very, very good writing. Love it. Very menacing. Very creepy.
To be rumor, not to have to be.
Yes. Yeah, this
Oh,
whole
it's
thing
incredible.
about like, be a legend, be a story, and yeah, it's really, really excellent. So she ends up waking up covered in blood and has either Candyman did this or she did, not very clear which at this point in the film, cut the head off of a Rottweiler, which absolutely normally would wreck me. This is the one film in which a dog dies horrifically that it actually didn't mess with me that badly, because also this woman's baby is missing, and that is far worse.
Right.
Because of course you see the blood and you're just like, oh my god, did
Yeah,
the
you think it's a
kid
baby.
get
I will
killed?
say, while I love the movie, the one thing that doesn't make me feel as bad when that scene comes on is that the headless dog does look very fake to me.
It does look
I mean,
incredibly fake, yes.
They're very
That also
judicious
helps.
with the editing, so they don't really
Yeah, it's
show it that
fast, yeah.
well.
Yeah.
But I'm like, you know, it's kind of like if you ever saw that horrible movie that Mark Wahlberg was in, where he's like obsessed with that girl, and they kill the family dog, and he sticks it through the doggy door, and it is like
Oh
made
my
out of paper mache.
God.
It's made out of paper mache practically. It's like ridiculous. So
Oh my God.
it always reminds me of that. I forget what that movie's called, but it always reminds me
Fear
of that.
or something.
Yeah, I think it
Something
actually is
like
here. Yeah.
Oh my god. So, yeah, that's just one of those things that really squicks me. You know, anything bad happens to animals, anything bad happens to children, and I'm just like, So, yeah, the dog head does look incredibly fake, which I'm very, very grateful for, because a lot of the other effects in the film are very, very unsettling. So that particular one being, you know, okay, that is a fake dog head, definitely helps. And again, also the fact that, you know, this woman that she's been talking to and interviewing, she's one of the people that she interviewed about Candyman to learn more about what's going on. So this woman has a baby, and this baby has been evidently kidnapped. Thankfully not dead yet. Great, wonderful, love that. But then this woman
He goes
is, of
on to live an
course-
interesting life.
yeah, he
As
does
we'll
go on to
find
live a
out.
very interesting life, but that's my other
Anthony,
film.
yes,
We'll get to
yes,
that.
yes.
We'll get to that one. So she ends up getting taken in by the police, of course. They're a lot less kind to her this time, because it looks like she just murdered a dog and possibly a baby. And, you know, there's this whole interesting political thing of like, when she's assaulted, there's even commentary in the film about this of like, well, you know, these things happen all the time to Black people living in this neighborhood, but the second a white woman gets attacked, they care all of a sudden, and they have to investigate it. And then that kind of gets turned on its head when she's accused of murdering this child, because everybody suspects, as her legal counsel tells her, they're gonna find the body. Like, they're pretty sure the kid is dead. And it's just a matter of, okay, well, what happened to him? So she's, you know, presumed to have done this terrible thing, and she doesn't remember any of this. She has no memory of it. She's like, I'm innocent. It was Candyman for
How did
crying
you
out
how did
loud.
you feel the first time you watched this? Because I mean, I love the movie top to
I love
bottom.
it. Yeah.
I do too, but the first time I watched it, the fact that everyone, without any question or evidence, totally turns on her, it
Yeah.
drove me fucking crazy.
I feel like
and that used to happen in a lot of movies from that period. A lot
I
of
feel
those,
complicated
you know,
about I feel complicated
framing and,
about it,
you
because
know,
like on the one hand, like just knowing enough about the film and knowing enough about the story that I thought they were trying to tell with it, my strong suspicion was that she was guilty, or
oh, see,
it
I
was
never
like
thought that.
or let me finish, or it was like
Okay.
a combined thing of like psychosis and like possession, or I don't know, something like that.
So you
I
didn't think
that
Candyman
she-
was real when you first saw it?
what?
So you didn't actually think he was real when you first saw it?
No, I did.
Oh,
I
okay.
did. I thought
Okay.
that you're getting ahead of me a little bit.
Okay, I'm getting confused.
So let me finish. It's not that I thought that she was malicious, to be very, very clear. The commentary that I thought the film was trying to make was basically, she has good intentions, but is screwing up. The research in the first place was potentially doing harm to that community. It's one of those things, like, because I, as a scholar, think about this a lot, especially because I do research involving race and gender and all of these complicated identity things. it's like, what is in my lane as a white person doing that research? And then like I see her doing this and I'm like, okay, I see why she's interested in this. I see why she's doing this. She should probably listen to her Black colleague that is being like, Helen, you are being an idiot.
But see, a
And she
lot of
doesn't
this
do
is
it.
coded in with her and her husband and that professor because they patronize her. And so she's trying
Yes, and
extra
there's
hard
the
to prove
sexism.
herself. You
Right.
know?
Right.
Yeah.
So like they're sexist as hell. They're
Oh,
not
they
going to
are.
listen to
Yeah.
her. They're going to listen to Bernadette even less because she's Black on top of being a woman.
Yeah.
So there's all of that. So basically my read on it the first time that I watched this was like, okay, so this is my take on what maybe they're going for, or where I would like to see it go, like thematically, is like, hey, you know, you have good intentions here, but you're gonna make mistakes. And in the case of this horror movie, those mistakes end up being maybe she killed this kid, or maybe she was possessed and that psychosis led her to kill the kid, or maybe like Candyman like technically did it, but like through her or something.
Right.
These things happen in horror movies.
No, I get what you're
okay?
saying.
There's lots of ways it could have gone.
I just
So that was my
never,
thought
that had
process
never
while I was
occurred to me.
watching
So,
this.
okay, good.
So
But Tim made a good
that's
point. So
yeah.
that does
So you know, film continues and all of that. We find out that you know Candyman is real. Is how it seems, at least. He keeps on coming to her in these visions. He shows up physically. She gets physically hurt by him, but not killed yet. There's this whole thing about her becoming like part of the legend, right? He keeps on saying that over and over again. It's like, you know, like our disciples or whatever, the people who keep on telling the story and passing that story on, need something to believe in. They need to believe in Candyman. They need to believe in the lore, the legend, and all of that. And basically the kid is being used as kind of a pawn in this situation to get her, who seems like she's supposed to be his real victim. But you know, again, he has to mess with her first, right? So all of this is going on. She's like, I'm innocent, it's Candyman, nobody believes her. Of course, people, including her partner, keep on thinking, oh, she's actually, you know, doing all of this bad stuff. She's just fucking crazy and has done these terrible things. She even comes back from escaping from the mental institution that her legal counsel sends her off to, basically to try to discern whether she's competent to stand trial. And she comes back and there's another woman living in her house and painting it, and she's just like, what the hell, man? Like, and you know, it's been a month since she was first arrested. She doesn't realize how much time's gone by. There's just a whole lot going on with that. And she basically, you know, sets out to prove her innocence. She's like, okay, no, gosh darn it, I am proving this. And ultimately where it leads to is she ends up finding the kid. The kid is like in this structure of junk that's like piled up. And you know, he's crying. So she goes to him to try to rescue him, because of course you hear a crying child in a very precarious place, you're gonna go help the kid, unless you're an asshole. So she goes and tries to do this. Candyman, of course, shows up and is like, hi, hello, time for us to die now. And the community all comes with fire. They're saying, you know, light him on fire, light him on fire. And they, you know, set to burning this thing. She's still desperately trying to help the child, you know, get out of there and get to safety. Candyman says something about like, she's like, you know, just let us go. Let me save this kid. You know, he's an innocent, like you said, he shouldn't die. And he's like, well, I can't do that. We're already dead. And it's like, huh, what? So there's, you know, whatever weird twist, of, you know, either they're literally dead, it's like an I see dead people moment, or it's, you know, there's no getting out of this. We're about to be burned to a crisp, Helen. But she does end up being able to hurt him so that she can get out with the kid. She does get burned the hell up. Her head's like burned to a freaking crisp, you know, like her hair's all gone, like head melty and stuff. She gets out, she gets the kid back to his mother, and she dies because she ain't surviving that. So she ends up dying, and then it goes to her funeral, which her partner shows up at, seems very sad. remorseful because in the end, oh, she actually wasn't this bad person. And you know, she rescued this kid, right? So they lower her casket into the ground, and then this entire community shows up, led by the woman with her infant son, also led by this little boy who also helped her with the investigation. Basically, you know, he's kind of like the mouthpiece for the legend, as a believer in it and everything. And they throw the hook into the ground with her casket. Then it goes back to the husband. He goes home. He's grieving, of course. He looks in his bathroom mirror and he says her name. Guess how many times he says her name? It's 5. And then she shows up and kills him. So she did, in fact, become part of the legend. There's one point where Candyman says, "It was you all along, Helen." And you see the place where she saw the Candyman face, like mural, and there's a mural of her as well. Her face is there and she's on fire because that was how she died. So that parallels the way that Candyman died back in the 19th century when he was lynched. And you know, she goes through the same thing. She gets, you know, violently disfigured. She ends up dying to the fire. And there's this kind of like, I think it's open to interpretation. I saw like kind of a bit of a vibe that, I don't know, maybe he kind of saw like the woman that he loved in her a little bit, and like there's that weird parallel there. I don't know if that's meant to be super
Actually,
literal.
that's another thing. If you watch it enough and you read about it, this is what I didn't get for like the first 10 times I saw it. Even though it's right in front of you, if you've watched The Mummy or Dracula with Jack Palance or Dracula with Gary Oldman, she is the woman.
Yeah.
It's not, that's
like
not
literally.
No,
literally,
that's why he says we're dead. She's
okay.
been dead for 100 and some years.
And then
it's a reincarnation of, it's just the same story.
Okay,
It's a classic Gothic horror.
Yeah.
It's an urban
and then
Gothic.
They fuck it up in part 2 because
Yeah,
then
they
they try
yes,
to claim
we'll get to that.
the woman,
We will
that
get
the
to
woman
that.
in part
We will
2. Yeah,
rant
Yeah, they
about
screw
part
up
2
the thing with
together.
Helen.
We will get there. That is my second
That's
film. Other
capitalism.
people
That's
need turns,
capitalism.
but
I actually like part.
God.
By the way, I actually like part 2. I'm just saying.
I like it all
I
right
do
too.
too.
I mean,
I have very mixed feelings about part 2. There's some things I
it
think they
fills
did well,
in
some
a few
things I think they
blanks,
didn't.
but then
Have
it's
you
We'll get
watched
there.
3? Have you watched 3, Kaelyn? That's the important question.
I
Okay.
stopped. I couldn't.
I own 3 on Blu-ray. I'm not proud that I have it on Blu-ray, but I do have it on Blu-ray because I'm a completist. It makes me
it's kind of
die a
forgettable.
little
I don't
each
even know if
time I
it's
watch
bad
it,
enough
yeah.
to be.
So does that mean you
it's-
have Godfather 3 also? Because I will sign off
I
if you do.
have all the worst.
Tim has
movies
Godfather
from
You
4.
know, to this
Yeah,
day,
oh,
I
yeah.
have only actually seen the first part of The Godfather. I really
Oh
need
well,
to.
Wow.
you're
I
not
need to
missing
fix that at
much.
some
You're not
point.
missing
I'm
much.
so sorry.
There's olive oil and spaghetti, and you're not really missing much. It is.
Listen, Fredo is the star of the show. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, that's true. John Cazale's
Love this.
always the star of any movie he's in.
Gosh.
Mhm,
So
He was the star of The Deer Hunter.
yes.
all right.
Yes, he
So
was.
And A Dog Day
in
Afternoon,
interest of
too.
in interest of time, let me wrap this up by just saying Candyman, freaking incredible film. It's about urban legends, it's about race, it's about gender, it's about gentrification, it's about like racism and white supremacy and violence and poverty and like all of these things, and it brings all of them together in such a genuinely just very well thought out story, a very well thought out character and lore. The acting is very good. The soundtrack is beautiful. I really, really love the soundtrack to
It's
this
the best
film.
thing Philip Glass ever did, I think.
So good. I've had the
Incredible.
theme just kind of in my head like all day.
Yeah.
And I probably will for a while. Just really, really excellent. I love this one a lot. It's something really special, and I definitely, I cannot recommend it enough. So
I think it was
thank you for
very
the opportunity to chat
underrated.
about it.
I think it was
Yeah.
underrated for many years. I think it's a very serious, artistic, urban Gothic story. I mean, it's much more
is.
like a Clive Barker novel
Yeah.
experience than it is
And
like a slasher movie.
What's interesting with that? I mean, when you read The Forbidden, it has none of the racial and social commentary because Candyman in that story is just an entity. There's no background of that. In fact, Helen's
But Barker did
research
make all that up. He produced the movie.
He did. Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, yeah. But I'm saying it's interesting
It's not in
how
the story.
they complement each other, but
Yeah.
they don't really talk about the exact same thing. You know, because Barker really was hung up on like urban fantasy. He was like, what's in that crack with the wall? It's a whole, you know, civilization. And that's kind of how he portrays Candyman in that movie. So I think it's so interesting that they take it from being kind of a very white centered, you know, like urban blight of Manchester, England type of story, and they turn it into Chicago and very like, you know, very attuned with the times and that's the version that people know and that survives. Not that Barker's story isn't good, but it's like when people are so used to the movie and then they read the story, they go, well, what the heck's this? This isn't like the, you know, because those elements that everybody knows from it are so removed from that.
Yeah, I think they are complementary. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And
that's the beauty of adaptations. It's the fact that you can
Yeah.
take like this idea and this like, you know, story template and this myth, and you can like retell it in a way that adds something to it. And that's what I love about adaptations so much.
Yeah. We should do another show on adaptation.
Like, if you do a 1-to-1 adaptation, you're screwed up.
Yeah. And pretty much every line that Candyman says in the story is his line in the movie. Yeah. Like they pretty much just repurpose all
from
his
the
lines.
story.
Yeah. Which, so it's just interesting when you look at those and how they reflect each other.
Because
reflect
if you know that
unintended with
Barker,
that.
if you look at the racial stuff they added, and then you know the urban legend stuff, and then you look at Barker as being the kind of a modern icon of horror, and that's why I emphasize the gothic horror, because like, okay, like when he picks her up and carries her to that altar, I mean that's in a zillion Dracula movies. And, it's an archetype, and he modernized it in this like really, to me, it's a very romantic movie. I hate that he wrecks her life. That really pisses me off. But he's so obsessed with being with her spirit, even though she doesn't remember it, that he does all this just for that reason. And that the immortality is, they're legend.
By the way, I wish that I could get over things as quickly as her husband does. I mean, the first day she's out of the house, he's repainting it. He has a new person there. I mean, I worked on things for months and months and months.
It was so fast. I'm just like, it's not the fact that he has a new girlfriend within a month. It's the fact that she's moving in and painting. I'm just like, bro.
He's like, well, the wipe's away. I can now color this the way I want it to. You know, it's just that crack. He's such a doofus in that movie. Like he kind of makes me laugh through the entire movie, because I would say the one flaw of that movie, I get why he's there, is just how ridiculous in the movie that
he really is.
There's all this serious stuff going on,
really
and then he's like, and then they cut to him, and he's like, you know what would really make me feel better if you like would just shut up and like leave me in the house, and then like I could bring my girlfriend over, you know. So I'm like, what are you?
Yeah, I hate him. He's really annoying.
It's so frustrating, because from the objective point of view of all the other characters who all believe she's guilty, just with unreservedly, they don't even stop for 1 second to consider she might be innocent ever at all, even, especially her husband.
Oh yeah, I forgot.
He wanted to get rid of her, and the way everyone treats her so bad is, I believe, this is just a theory. I haven't really thought this through, but it's like she's a pariah. Okay, she's kind of made herself a pariah by pursuing this story, and actually by being smarter than her husband, smarter than the professor who's a dickhead. And you know, admittedly, Bernadette is a lot smarter. I agree with that.
Yes.
But Bernadette is wiser. But the thing is, she's so much better than all those people. The police woman who makes her lift her breasts. All those people say nasty things to her. The nice detective who suddenly is like, you disgust me. And I'm like, so the first time I watched it, I was so frustrated. I'm like, this is so exaggerated. Like, so they demonize her to this extreme.
Also, that makes me think of something I was going to say earlier, then I forgot, because we started having the steam coming out of the ears moment.
Introducing the steam.
What I was going to say is that bit about nobody being even remotely willing to believe her strikes me also as unrealistic, just because of the like
yeah.
race and gender, like what you'd expect. Like, white woman says she's innocent, you would think that people would want to believe her, or at least give her like a shred of the benefit of the doubt.
Sure,
And
but
especially
if you're
given the fact that they literally had just talked about like, oh, she gets assaulted and suddenly the police care, and it's like, okay, well, now this happens, and it's like, oh no, she's totally guilty.
Yeah, they
And it's
turn on
like,
her completely, and you're right,
They
it's
do.
stuff that they can't explain. And so we've seen this in so many movies that you know, you're never supposed to believe anything fantastic really exists ever. And you know, we're taught that in real life, and I know
well,
that's
yeah,
not true.
but that's but listen, if I'm on the bus, and as inevitably happens because I'm a magnet for these folks, some crazy person sits next to
Happens
me
to be
and
on the
starts-
bus too. Yeah.
starts
me
telling me
too.
how they've been unjustly accused of murder because they said, you know, Candyman 3 times in the mirror, and he appeared and actually did the murder.
5
but then he
times,
disappeared.
Bill, 5
Yeah,
times.
5
It's fine
times.
if you
I
agree,
mean,
it's gotta be 5.
I am either getting a new seat or very possibly opening the window and diving out of the bus. I don't care how fast.
But
it's
that's
going
the
on
urban
highway.
legend side of it.
gonna
We're talking
believe
about
them.
police and doctors and psychiatrists. I mean, not
Yeah.
one of them. What it is to me is like it's a criticism of authority.
Well,
They
yeah,
all
well, I
think
was
they
gonna
know
say,
more than her. They all
what I
think they're
find
smarter
really
than her.
interesting, what I
know?
find really interesting about horror movies and the horror fan base is you look at a lot of horror fans who are very kind of like prudent, honestly, conservative, you know, and this kind of stuff. But you look at, I mean, every cop in every horror movie is a moron. There isn't a single
Yeah.
solitary
Sure.
horror movie that has
Because
a
the movie
cop
would be
that,
over.
well,
There
yeah,
really aren't
but
very
what-
many
what-
now.
and that's what I'm saying. So many horror movies criticize institutions, and sometimes they do it intentionally, sometimes
Well,
they do it
yeah.
unintentionally.
Do you know that only
Yeah.
2% of all violent crimes, like serial killers, are ever solved by police?
Oh,
Yeah.
Police just like to
absolutely.
have power and hurt people. They don't give a shit about
Yes.
solving
Yeah,
crime.
and
That is in
and that's
fact
what I
the
think.
case.
And that's what I think they're
is-
criticizing in these movies. They're taking that
Yeah,
idea and
yeah,
exaggerating.
I was
Yeah,
saving that
exactly.
rant for the second film I'm
Mhm.
going to talk
Okay.
about, but
Oh, yeah,
yes,
yeah.
that rant is in there. That rant is in there.
I
Mhm.
almost
I think
did
it's just
Candyman 3,
storytelling.
but I decided not to.
It is storytelling, yeah.
You know,
And
I mean, if the authorities believe, if you know, the whole idea
Yeah.
of horror is that you, the
Yeah.
individual, know
Yeah.
something bad's going on, and
Yeah.
there's no one you can turn to. If you
Yeah.
turn to the cops and they go, okay, we're going to replace our bullets with silver bullets. Thanks for the tip. Well, that's the end of your vampire movie. I mean, there's not a whole lot
but
going
think
on
about
there.
you just brought up a good example, Bill, because I think there are movies that create verisimilitude by doing that, like The Howling. The guy does buy the silver bullets just in case.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Have the wherewithal. Okay, and then in the movie you reviewed, Sugar Hill, her ex-boyfriend knows something's a little not quite
Yeah.
right, you know. But in Candyman, there's none of that. They're just like it's all like Aristotelian linear. It's like A, B, this is that way, A, you
Yeah.
are lying, and
Well,
just,
you know, Occam's
Yeah.
razor is pretty much the way you should live your life. I mean, look,
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
this is. Let me just say this because this is something I sincerely believe in.
yeah, sure.
If perchance you out there, our audience, discover that your next door neighbor is a vampire,
Okay.
werewolf, zombie, whatever, Wendigo, that'd be kind of cool outside the box.
Yeah.
All right, okay. You do not go to the cops and say there is a Wendigo
No.
renting the Airbnb across the street from me. All right, they will rightly think you're an idiot on drugs, and they will put you
course.
in jail, where the
That's true.
Wendigo will bend the bars and kill you. Okay.
And
No,
also,
actually, what
I
I would
wanna
do in
tell-
that situation
go
is
ahead.
I would consult all of my native friends who have like cultures connected to that folklore and be like, help, what the fuck do I
But
do?
see, think about
Like,
what Bill's saying. If Bill's saying like your
Yeah.
average white person, you know,
no.
I mean, seriously, not like people like us who are weirdos who actually know weird people. But I mean, seriously, he's right. I mean, the cops, yeah, they think you're insane. I mean,
Here,
you know,
I want to
I-
say another thing.
honestly-
I want to say another thing to our audience, though. If any of these things you experience them, but you find Bill on the bus, do not tell him about that either,
Alone.
because
Yeah,
he
Do
will
not
also
tell
not be
Bill.
interested. Yeah, he will also
He's not
be
helping
interested.
you.
he'll know
I
you're
would do
telling
it.
the truth. Come on.
And honestly, if some of my Inuit friends, if I went to them and say there is a Wendigo living across the street from me, they're going to call the cops on me, and as they should. I would totally not blame them. So here's what you do. I don't just tell you what's wrong with the world. I try to give you a solution. I'm good like that. You go to the cops, but you don't mention Wendigos. You tell them it's a weird sex cult, or
Yeah,
he
exactly.
Yeah,
took
that
a
works.
small child
sex
into
cult
the
would
building
definitely
that
work.
clearly,
Yeah,
whatever. You come
yeah.
up with some story, they will go in there and probably get killed by the Wendigo, but that's how they're going to learn.
But you know a movie that parodied that, Bill? Was
So we're
Get
just
Out.
using that first round of cops as fodder. I like this
Yeah.
plan.
Well, think
I would
about
tell
Get
I would tell the
plan.
cops I don't like the
Think
first
about
one.
in Get Out. In Get Out, he doesn't know his friends like all into this sci-fi mind control, but
Oh,
he
God.
is like white people do that sex cult, and he's convinced all of these
Yeah.
black cops are going to agree with him, and they
Yeah.
laugh at him. So it turns
Yeah.
the whole thing over. You
Yeah,
know?
well,
Yeah.
you know,
it's like,
Yeah.
it's
Look,
like
I'm
they're
not
making
saying
fun of
That's
what
why Get
I'm
Out is
talking
so
about.
brilliant.
You know,
I'm
Yeah,
not
that's
saying it's going to
funny, 'cause-
work. If you got a
Because when
Wendigo, if
that-
you're living next to a
Well-
Wendigo, odds are you're a dead man. But I'm just giving you a fighting
Well,
chance.
Also,
As
also,
one-
like just for the
Oh,
record,
go ahead.
we are all
Yeah.
screwed because you have said it out loud and you're not supposed to.
It's okay. It's all right.
That's part of the folklore. You have to say
It's
it. But
okay.
anyway,
It's all right.
Bill
Well,
died
so
as he lived.
the one
I
last
burnt
thing
soul.
I will say, just real quick, is that the story doesn't have any of those police elements in them or any of those like
Right.
gaslighting Helen elements. So it's the kind of thing I feel like from a writing perspective, they're like, oh shit, well, we're gonna put these in the movie. I don't know how we're gonna get from point A to point B, so let's just have them just not believe her. Yeah, fuck it.
Well, you know, I
Let's
thought
have
that the
them look
first
at that.
several times I saw it, and it frustrated me. But now I think
Yeah.
I think it is like lampooning all of that on another
Oh yeah,
level.
probably.
You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
I think it
absolutely.
is saying authoritative figures who think they're brilliant or scholars or think, you know, have all the answers don't necessarily have any
I
answers.
don't know shit.
They're not
speaking as a
necessarily gonna
scholar, we
help
do
you.
not have all the answers.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I threw that
Yeah.
scholar bone. I'm glad you picked it up.
We have a
Henry.
lot of questions, actually.
Yeah.
That's how that
I don't
works.
now.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I disagree. I don't think Clive Barker is as cinematic a writer as, say, Stephen King, whose books feel like, well, while he was writing it, he could almost see the screenplay. You know, that he's using the structure of a
No,
screenplay.
Barker's in the psychology part.
Yeah, Barker. I mean, his short stories are great, but when you hear, oh, they're going to turn this one to a movie, you're like,
Well,
really?
the other problem with Barker is that he puts stuff in his books, especially sexually, that are just way
Mhm.
too taboo for them to
Oh,
put
yeah.
into most.
It's a fluke that
any
he got
movies,
popular.
yes.
It's a fluke
Yeah,
that he
yeah.
got as big as Stephen King briefly.
Yeah, and then
Because he's
kind
way
of,
more subversive than King or
Yeah.
Kuntz or Gaiman.
Well,
or
the other thing
anybody.
is that the other
You
thing
know.
about Barker is that he
But
started to transition
he was
into
lucky.
fantasy more so than
Yeah.
horror.
Sure.
I mean, his
Yeah.
output of the past 20 years has mostly been urban fantasy
Like a
rather than just
Magica
straight. Yeah, like
Yeah.
Magica, a lot of stuff like Weave World, you know, a lot of
Great
different stuff
Secret
like that.
Code.
So, which is one other thing, because I know you're going to cover this later. I'm going to say one thing. Weave World made me think of this. It kind of pisses me off that the other Candyman movie doesn't credit Clive Barker at all in the credits. The only thing that they
The
have
new one
that's
doesn't
Clive
credit
Barker-
him?
Correct. It does
Really?
not.
Wow.
And the
Well, you
only
know,
thing
we've
that
seen
they
enough
do-
Marvel movies that shouldn't
Yeah,
surprise us
yeah.
anymore.
The only thing that they do is they acknowledge him when they have the character reading Weave World by him. And that's the only time that they bring up Clive. But they never in the credits anywhere say that it's a Clive Barker story. And I'm like, really? That pissed me
Kaelyn
off
is going to
this
be
time.
Kaelyn is going to be thrilled to find out. I've only seen the new one once. So
Same.
I have not put a fraction of as much thought into it. So I'm open to whatever. But
I actually started
Awesome, because I got
rewatching it.
opinions and
I
sounds like
started
Tim does too.
rewatching it out of spite because they didn't credit Clive
Spite.
Barker. So I kept watching
Well,
it because
and
I'm
you
like,
know,
are
a
they
lot
going
of
to
people
credit
were
him at some
upset
point?
about. The thing about it is, it's a sequel. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not a reboot. It's a sequel.
Yeah.
And the thing is,
Yeah.
people were mad that Tony Todd wasn't going to be in it, and there were different reports. Some people said Tony Todd was mad. Some people said he didn't care. Some people said just call me, whatever. You know, that's probably more likely. I need work. If you got a few minutes, I'll be in it. and you know, I didn't really have that invested in it because to me, it doesn't have the flavor of the first, even the third movie. It has nothing like the remotely what we've been talking about. To me, it's like a different take completely on the same character. That's just how I saw it, but I've only seen it once. So I'd be
Yeah.
That's true. That's true.
Hey guys, I hate to bug out, but I do have to go. I gotta
you got to
get
move
this
some
ready
stuff,
for this.
right?
I gotta move some furniture.
All right,
Have
man.
fun with your
Okay.
oven.
Good
luck.
You know,
Hi.
whatever it is.
The other movie I was going to do is barely actually applies to this topic,
But it is a cool
okay.
movie.
it is a cool movie. But we'll get a chance to talk
Okay.
about it again. And oh, by the way, did I hear something about we're now on Spotify?
Yeah, well, episode
We are
1.
now on Spotify.
And the next
Good for
episode will be
you.
up this weekend, and it's
Congratulations.
about adaptations. Bill was there. So
Speaking of
Kaelyn,
adaptation.
feel free to
Brand
watch it because we
synergy.
should do a
Brand
sequel.
synergy.
It's,
Yeah, yeah.
that was
It
a
was
fun
great talking with you
All
all.
right, buddy.
Take
All
care.
right,
See
Love
bye,
you
you.
all.
Bill.
Yeah,
Have a good
man.
night.
Night.
Bye.
Take it easy, friend.
Toodles. I
Okay,
miss
Tim, I'm
him
gonna
already.
let you go. I'm gonna let you go next instead of me because I just
Okay.
Candyman
That's actually
thing
gonna be
is
my
wore
Oh
me
question,
wait,
because
but
out.
hold on. I do have something to
because
say about
be-
Candyman, though. I
Oh,
have
go
some.
for
yeah,
it.
I was
Yeah,
we
just
should
kind
just
of.
made a whole
Please.
Candyman
Please,
episode.
I was just putting
please.
the smoke
Yeah, go
kind of
ahead.
clear. It's
Yeah,
so
go ahead.
multi-layered. It's so multi-layered because I'm just from a whole different, you know what I mean, a whole different perspective on that theme, on that movie. It was there were that whole dynamic of this sort of like scary, hooked, with all of the honey and
The bees.
there's the bees, and then it's a very taboo because it's still close to still modern times. So
You're talking
we're
about the way Black people were lynched and tortured.
correct, right,
Mhm.
right. Yes. So to even present that, I thought
Mhm.
was like really amazing to
Oh,
me
yeah.
that was how that was even portrayed. And then also understand that there were how many Black men lynched because white women claimed that they were assaulted by them.
Yes.
A lot of
You see what I
times,
mean?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I'm
So
Absolutely.
there's that element. And then Kathleen was saying about interracial relationships. Well, that would not have been a dynamic that would have been like could it have been consensual? I don't know. If you're a slave, how consensual can anything really
He
be?
wasn't a
Right.
slave though. He was a free man of color. He was rich.
Right. Okay. Yes, that's actually true. That's very true.
Yeah.
He was.
He
So
was like
in
he
that,
like he was probably born a slave, but did not live
yes.
long as a slave.
Right,
Mm.
right. But even though he may have been able to buy his freedom, when saying quotation marks, that energy of how you're still going to be
Oh, of course.
underfoot. Do you know what I mean? So that
Mhm.
was kind
Even
of
in New
there.
Orleans, even in New
Mhm.
Orleans, I mean, I think in New Orleans you'd have a much better
Mhm.
shot, but
Mhm, mhm,
but
mhm.
that even happened there though. There was
What
still
we
Right.
need, what
those
we need
tensions.
is clarification from the sassy British professor that tells the story of the movie.
Who is
Because
played,
his
I'm pretty
voice,
sure, by the director. I'm pretty sure that's Bernard Rose.
no,
who
that's not. I don't
It's
think
not.
that's Bernard Rose. It's
Oh,
a
he
different
plays
actor.
the other professor. You're right. That's
Yes,
another
yeah.
actor.
But
That
that
guy
guy,
is
his
annoying as shit.
voice, I could
He
just
is really
listen to him read
annoying.
the phone book. It's I can
Oh.
listen to him read the phone book. I love him. So
Oh, I'm the
it's
opposite.
so
I couldn't listen
ridiculous.
to him.
Also, like
It's
just
so
speaking of like
ridiculous.
the professor being condescending
Yeah.
and everything, it's like, okay,
Yeah.
so on the one hand,
Yeah.
white, on the other hand, guy, on the other hand, British. Like, come on, we're
Right.
just going to
Yeah.
add that on top of it. You're talking about an American urban legend.
Right. It's a
Right.
colonialist
like,
trying
come
to
on,
talk
dude.
down to American middle class people
If it
about
makes-
more Black people, and it's
If
like,
it makes
hello.
people feel, if it makes people feel any
Layers
better,
and
he
layers
dies
and
in
layers.
part 2. He dies in
Does
part
he
2.
die in part
You
Good.
ruined it
does.
for me. You
Oh, I
ruined
gotta
it.
rewatch that.
Sorry.
The pox
Yeah.
on
He
you,
dies
though.
in part 2. Oh well. It's a 30-year-old movie. He dies in part 2.
If you
I've
haven't
only
seen
seen
it,
2 and
it's
3
too
once.
late.
I liked
So,
I liked
Lots of
part
people
2,
die in these
but
movies. It's
yeah.
okay.
Go ahead, Briggie.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Go ahead.
so I found that dynamic was pretty interesting.
Mhm.
And that's also very much a fantasy of white women as well. To
Yep.
have like this big Black guy take them, that's a
And
very
vice
Yep.
versa. Black men
That's
and
a
white women.
Take them like, whoa.
Though not as
okay.
bad as people make it sound. That's like what white men are afraid of, that all Black men are going to take their women. But there are a lot of Black men who do fetishize white women, just says the opposite, you know.
right,
They
right,
did.
right.
That is a
Yeah.
thing, but it's also like a slightly different dynamic though, because
Yeah, it is a little different dynamic.
yeah, it's a little different because
But
that's
it's still
also
a fetish.
it is, but that's also related to like not seeing Black women as being as desirable as white women, and that comes
Exactly.
from all of
Right.
all of that like societal pressure and baggage and stuff. That's a whole nother video.
Oh, there's a
to be
movie
completely
I'd love to talk to y'all
honest.
about that I rewatched recently that I used to think was just trash, and now I think it's really pretty deep actually. But it takes place in New Orleans it's an blaxploitation movie
Oh, okay.
called Quadroon, and
I've never
it's
heard
not
of
as
it.
Oh, I've heard of that.
but
I
it's
haven't
not
watched
as
that one, but I've read
exploitative
about
a
that
second
one.
watch. because once you watch it again, the white director is really kind of slamming every echelon of New Orleans society, of every pigmentation. Like, they each have a social stratus and ways you're supposed to behave. And of course, we the audience are just rooting for
Just
the guy we like to get with the woman we like. We don't care what race they are, but that's the point. Everyone else does care.
just gonna button this whole thing by saying that if you think that he's creepy in the movie, you try hearing Tony Todd talk to you very casually in person, which he did to me, which is a completely different experience.
Tim, it was always you.
I was telling the Briggie, I met Tony Todd at a convention,
Mhm.
and just so like I was in the presence of Candyman, and it was very strange.
That's
It was very
cool,
strange.
and also
And then he talked to me
terrifying in a good
because
way.
he was like mad at somebody that was at his table. He's like, "Hang on, I'm gonna talk to this guy," and I'm like, "Oh God, I'm this guy," and then and I'm like, "I'm Mr. Candyman, sir," It's like that was like that type of stuff, and it was very funny. But the moment he talks and that velvety voice comes out, you're just like, "Hi, Mr."